The questions we never ask. Reimagining addiction treatment. We're asking the wrong questions. Every day across this country, women walk into treatment centers desperate for help with addiction. And what happens? They're handed a clipboard with questions like: how much do you use? How often? Do you have stable housing? Where are your children? Questions that quantify their failure, questions that document their shame, questions that completely miss the point. I recently had the privilege of interviewing Candiace Brown-Pulliam, a revolutionary force in addiction treatment who is shattering outdated paradigms and rebuilding systems of healing from the ground up. Her work isn't just changing treatment protocols, it's saving lives that traditional approaches have failed for decades. Candiace has devoted her life to one radical idea: that behind every addiction lies not a moral failing, but a human story of pain that deserves to be heard, acknowledged, and healed. Through her work, Candice has revealed a profound truth. We've been focusing on the symptoms while ignoring the disease. We've been obsessed with the what of addiction while neglecting the why. The questions we ask determine the answers we get. And the questions we're asking aren't working. Consider this: 75% of women in treatment programs report histories of trauma, yet traditional intake processes barely scratch the surface. Instead, they focus on cataloging behaviors rather than understanding their origins. As Candice powerfully articulated during our conversation, we keep asking how much they use when we should be asking what happened before they started using. This isn't just a semantic difference, it's the difference between treating the cough and curing the pneumonia, between putting a bandage on a wound or removing the knife. The current model of addiction treatment is built on a fundamental misunderstanding. It assumes that addiction is primarily about substances, when in reality, substances are often just the solution people have found to cope with unbearable pain. As Candice explained, addiction isn't the primary problem, it's the solution people have found to their primary problem. Let me be clear: trauma doesn't excuse destructive behavior, but it does explain it. And you cannot effectively treat what you don't understand. The evidence supporting this trauma informed approach is compelling. Let me share some real stories that Candice discussed during our interview. Christina James, now a DJ at Educational Media Foundation, the parent organization of Christian radio networks K Love and Air One, cycled through 6 traditional treatment programs before finding one that asked different questions. The first 5 programs focused exclusively on her substance use patterns: how much, how often, with whom. They created detailed charts of her usage, but never once asked about the childhood trauma that preceded it. I felt like a collection of problems, Christina told Candice. No one was interested in me as a person with a history, with experiences that shaped me. They just wanted to catalog my failures. The 6th program took a different approach. Instead of starting with her substance use, they began by creating a safe space for Christina to share her story. They asked about her life before addiction. They recognized that her substance use wasn't the problem, it was her solution to a problem no one had helped her address. The results speak for themselves. Christina has now maintained sobriety for 3 years. She uses her platform in Christian broadcasting to advocate for trauma informed approaches, and her story has inspired EMF to partner with trauma informed treatment centers across the country. The moment someone asked me what happened before I started using, Christina shared, was the first time I felt seen in a treatment setting. It was the first time I didn't feel like just another addict. So it was the first time I had hope. But this approach extends beyond clinical settings. Candice shared another powerful example from Mississippi State University's Extension Service, which developed a food as business program incorporating trauma informed principles into entrepreneurship training for women with histories of substance abuse. Traditional business development programs weren't addressing the unique barriers faced by women in recovery. Many of these women had unresolved trauma affecting their confidence and decision making. They would freeze during business negotiations or abandon promising opportunities because certain situations triggered trauma responses. The program integrated trauma informed practices alongside business skills training, acknowledging how past experiences shape current business challenges. The results were remarkable. Participants showed higher program completion rates and more sustainable business growth compared to traditional entrepreneurship programs. One participant, Maria, described her experience. In previous business classes, I was told I needed to be more assertive, but no one understood why that was so difficult for me. This program helped me understand how my past was affecting my present and gave me tools to navigate business situations that used to terrify me. Since launching in May 2025, the program has helped dozens of women not only build businesses, but also develop healthier relationships with success and failure. This approach has been adopted by other extension services across the Southeast, creating a new model for economic empowerment in recovery communities. What's particularly striking about Candiace's perspective is how widely applicable these principles are. Even everyday business interactions can either perpetuate or heal trauma responses. She shared the story of Peyton, who purchased furniture from a store in Augusta, Georgia. When the furniture arrived damaged, Peyton encountered a dismissive manager who exhibited unprofessional behavior and refused to acknowledge legitimate concerns. This interaction, being dismissed, disbelieved, and devalued, mirrored traumatic experiences from Peyton's past. I felt like I was back in my childhood home, Peyton told Candiace, where my feelings and experiences were constantly invalidated. I started doubting myself, wondering if I was overreacting, if the damage was somehow my fault. When Peyton called corporate headquarters, however, she spoke with a representative trained in trauma informed customer service who recognized the harmful interaction and responded differently. This representative didn't just resolve the furniture issue, they acknowledged how the interaction had impacted Peyton. The corporate response team has since implemented trauma informed customer service training for all store managers. These stories illuminate a crucial truth. Trauma informed approaches aren't just for therapist offices, they represent a fundamental shift in how we understand human behavior and human healing. So, what would happen if we reimagine our entire approach to addiction treatment through this lens? First, recovery rates would dramatically improve. When we address root causes rather than symptoms, healing becomes possible in ways it never was before. Women would experience less shame during the recovery process as the focus shifts from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. Second, treatment would become more individualized. One size fits all approaches fail because they don't recognize the unique circumstances and experiences of each person seeking help. While circumstances differ, the need for personalized, trauma informed care remains consistent. Third, we would interrupt intergenerational cycles of trauma and addiction. When parents heal, children benefit. The economic impact would be significant as well: reduced healthcare costs, increased workforce participation, and stronger families. But perhaps most importantly, we would restore dignity to a process that has too often stripped it away. The current system asks women to catalog their failures before offering help. It requires them to define themselves by their worst moments. It forces them to answer questions that reinforce their shame rather than questions that illuminate their path to healing. Candiace's work challenges us to do better, to ask better questions, to listen more deeply, to recognize that behind every addiction is a human being with a story that deserves to be heard. This isn't just about being kinder, though that matters. It's about being more effective. It's about recognizing that our current approach isn't working and having the courage to try something different. The statistics are sobering. Only about 35% of people who complete traditional addiction treatment maintain sobriety for a full year. But programs that incorporate trauma informed approaches see success rates closer to 60%. This isn't marginal improvement, it's transformative change. What makes Candiace's perspective so powerful is that it doesn't require massive new funding or complex technology. It requires something both simpler and harder, a fundamental shift in how we think about addiction and recovery. It requires us to stop seeing addiction as a moral failing and start seeing it as a response to suffering. It requires us to stop asking, "What's wrong with you?" and start asking, "What happened to you?" It requires us to recognize that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. I want to leave you today with both a challenge and an invitation. The challenge is this: examine the questions you're asking, not just about addiction, but about all human suffering you encounter. Are you focused on quantifying the problem or understanding its origins? Are you cataloging behaviors or seeking to understand the human being behind them? The invitation is to become part of this revolution in how we approach healing. Whether you work in healthcare, education, business, or simply care about the people in your life, you can begin asking different questions. You can create spaces where stories can be shared without judgment. You can recognize that behind every destructive behavior is a person trying to survive the only way they know how. Now imagine a world where we met pain with curiosity instead of judgment, where we recognize that the question, "What happened to you?" holds more healing power than "What's wrong with you?" could ever contain. Where we understood that addiction isn't about substances, it's about the human need to escape unbearable pain when no other relief seems possible. This is the world Candiace is fighting to create. And today, I'm asking you to join that fight, because every time we ask better questions, we create the possibility for better answers. Every time we listen to someone's story with compassion instead of judgment, we create a space where healing becomes possible. The revolution begins with a simple shift from "How much do you use?" to "What happened before you started using?" It begins with recognizing that behind every statistic is a human being with a story that matters. It begins with you, with me, with all of us choosing to see differently, listen differently, and ultimately to heal differently. The questions we ask reveal what we value. What will yours reveal about you?